Hello, my name is Richard Hudson. I'm the editor-in-chief of Science Business, and welcome to this webcast conference on what we're calling a rapid R&I Force. This is one in a series of conferences that we have been doing online about COVID R&D policy. This one is going to focus on, well, basically the question of how can we respond more quickly in future to emergencies of this sort? How can we mobilize technologies to respond right away to whatever disasters might be coming up, which unfortunately there seem to be quite a few if you combine the possibility of pandemic with global warming, with earthquake and other things. Here at the moment, I'm in Brussels, and right now lockdown is significantly easing. Many people are going back to work, to the office. I'm still at the moment at my home, but there are others who are at the office. The news today relevant to this is that the European Innovation Council just announced a few hours ago 314 million euros in more financing for companies with innovative ideas, about half of it for COVID and half of it for the European recovery. So we'll talk about first that news very briefly, and to join us for that, I'm delighted to say that we're joined by Jean-David Malo. He is the director of the EIC task force at the European Commission, and he can tell us a little bit more about that and what is next. We are also joined by Maria de Graça Carvalho, who is a member of the European Parliament from Portugal, former Portuguese science minister, and also currently rapporteur for one of the key pieces of legislation that is dealing with this on the European Institute of Innovation and Technology. And we are also joined by Sergio Bertolucci. He is a professor at the University of Bologna. He is also chair of the scientific committee of a large Horizon 2020 project called ATTRACT, which funds breakthrough technology development in, I believe it's 170 different projects around Europe. And I should add, Sergio was also chair of the Italian government's major risk committee, which was looking at these kinds of issues of crisis management. So to begin with, I am going to start with you, Jean-David. What is this announcement?
Good afternoon, Rich, and good afternoon to everybody. Many thanks for the opportunity of this meeting. You remember, Rich, that one of the motto of the European Innovation Council is to be agile and responsive. And in the context of the COVID crisis, we have tried to demonstrate that it was not just words, but indeed really a part of our DNA. And you remember that we launched a call for a proposal submitted by startup and SME in the context of the pilot of the EIC accelerator, which has a purpose to provide support for the scaling up of deep tech startup and SMEs that were expected to take place in March of this year. But we use this opportunity to complement, in fact, this call by an additional budget, thanks to the support of member states and for their agreement for this increase of the budget, in order to deliver support to these startup and SMEs that are dealing with COVID-related issues.
So the COVID work there, the COVID projects, give me a few examples of that.
For example, I mean, we have selected 36 projects that are relating to testing or treatment or prevention in the area of COVID. We have selected 3 in testing, 22 in treatment, 5 in prevention, as well as 6 others in relating innovation. Just to give you some concrete example, in treatment, for example, we have selected a company which is dealing with treatment of severe cases of infection of COVID with a particular molecule in a blended finance way in order to provide this French company to scale up quickly and to deliver concrete tools in the ground. We have selected another one which is dealing with a 3D image-based search engine and triggering software for lung CTs in order to improve radiology workflow in the context of the COVID. We have selected a third one that is dealing with lab instrument for cell nanotomography, which is coming from Ireland, in order there also to help our hospitals in their immediate treatment for severe cases. You have a number of companies like this. We have published the list of the 36 companies on our website today. They are coming from 12 different countries, the 36. Mainly member states, including, by the way, one country of the widening countries, which is Latvia, which is providing therefore a total coverage since the launch of the pilot in Europe, which is now covering 22 countries, and of course a number of associated countries.
Okay, so there is in this announcement, however, from what I read, also a significant proportion of equity financing. You referred to it as blended financing, but
indeed,
equity, I mean, in translation, this means that you are buying shares in these companies.
Indeed. I mean, the novelty, as you know, within the European Innovation Council and its accelerator scheme is that indeed we are not only proposing to a startup and SMEs to support them via grants, as we did it now for years, but also by a combination of grant and equity. Because if you want to scale up, and when you are a company, you have only 2 avenues to do it. Either, and this is raison d'être of a company, you have commercial activities. But when you are a startup, by definition, you are still finalizing your technology. You are not yet necessarily there regarding the possibility to have sufficient commercial activities to grow up. So the other possibility in order to scale up and to deploy your technology is to increase your capital. So this is the raison d'être of the equity support. What is the main novelty is that indeed in the past, what we did in this area was to use, in fact, existing funds, mainly private, but also some public funded funds, in particular in the venture capital area. Now, what we are proposing is to invest directly in this kind of company via an EIC fund that we have almost finalized in terms of establishment. It's the formal establishment will be announced in the coming days. So it's another news for you today, but it will be announced in something like 10 days. But the work, in fact, in terms of equity due diligence is already carried out. The work of the fund is already operational, but the official establishment will be in a few days.
Well, let me interrupt you a second. How will the fund work?
It's very simple. I mean, the fund will directly invest within the company, will act as a patient capital actor. The idea is certainly not to have a dilutive action on the company. The idea is to accompany the company in its growth and as soon as possible to opt out in order to attract private investors. I mean, our objective is certainly not to remain within the capital of the company, but to accompany the company in its growth and to provide additional traction, in fact, for private investor by taking the first risk on our shoulders. Very likely what will take place, and I can already tell you is already taking place, is that in reality, we will not invest alone. We will invest with co-investors, because some investors are very interested to have an institutional investor like ours, because it's by definition de-risking the investment, and this is already taking shape. Now, there are two cases where we may remain longer in the capital of the company. One case is when the company is in an area which is considered as sensitive because it's relating to security matters, and therefore may have an implication for the security of the union. The other case, of course, to be discussed also with the owner of the company, the promoter of the company, is a case where you have an issue of tech sovereignty for the union. And these are the two cases where we may stay longer within the capital of the company.
But so if
not,
you, let me interrupt you. So if one of these companies
yep,
were to produce a vaccine or a new treatment that's important for COVID, then
you have within the 36, for example, one which is directly working on the development of a vaccine, indeed, yeah.
So then, in that case, the EU institutions would own shares in that company, and
Indeed.
so Donald Trump could not come in and buy the company. Right?
At least we will have a word to say. It does not mean that necessarily each time we will take what is called a golden share. So you know this terminology,
Yeah.
but it may be the case indeed. Yeah.
I see. But is this? This is a pretty radical change. I've followed this subject area for many years, and only a few years ago, it would have been unthinkable that the EU institutions would own shares.
You certainly remember, Rich, and I remember that I participated to another of your remarkable session. This time with people. I mean, a few years ago when we launched the idea of the EIC, and where indeed, I mean, a lot of people were very skeptical at this time because it was certainly not the political trend to invest directly within companies with public means. But we can see now that in particular, due to the crisis, I mean, the minds are changing. And in the same spirit, I'm sure that you have noted that within the Next Generation EU proposal that the Commission has tabled a few days ago, you have a number of instruments that are directly relating also to tech sovereignty, to the possibility indeed to provide support for the growth of companies that are less risky than the one supported by the EIC, but in the follow-up of the support provided by the EIC, I have in particular in mind the new strategic investment window within InvestEU, which is proposed, and which has clearly this dimension in its DNA, of course, subject to the agreement of the Parliament and the Council. But the fact that the Commission is proposing this is already demonstrating a change of the mind within the Union.
Okay, all right. One last question from me about this, and that is also the announcement refers to some companies getting a so-called seal of excellence. That's, in other words, not money, something else. What's the something else?
So it's not money, but you have a particular case this time. Yes, indeed. At the same time, we are announcing the results where, as you said rightly, we will support 36 COVID-related companies and 36 that are more related to the recovery of our economy, so not related to COVID. We are also providing a total of 818 seals of excellence. So the idea of the seals of excellence was to provide an excellent stamp, in fact, to excellent proposal that pass all the threshold in terms of excellent criteria that we cannot finance because of the lack of budget, but that we consider deserve to be identified for other investors, including public financing, and with in particular in mind structural funds, because by definition, those companies are located somewhere and could have an important impact locally.
I see.
So it's not money, but you have a particular case, which are the new COVID-19 seals of excellence. Within the 818, you have 139 that are provided to COVID-related companies. And those companies, of course, are not receiving funding per se, but they will have a direct access for free to the business acceleration services of the EIC. So in other words, they will have the possibility to meet a number of corporates. They will have the possibility to have a matching session with investors. They will receive coaching and mentoring for free. So a number of accompanying measures that normally we are providing to our EIC-backed companies that we are now proposing for this COVID-19 Seals of Excellence company because of the crisis.
Okay, all right. So I guess politically, though, it isn't harmful for you to say that, look, here's 818 companies that could have had money if you, the member states, gave us more money. Is there a political dimension to this?
You can translate it this way if you want, Rich. No, but I mean, it's obvious that, you know, we are facing with a level of demand which is beyond our initial expectation. I mean, just to illustrate this with concrete figures, in the last call, we have received something like 4,000 applications calling for 10 billion euro of support. A third of them have passed all the thresholds, so normally were deemed to be financed. If you compare this with the available budget, despite the fact that we have increased the budget, it means that we are only able to support 1 out of 10. So it just demonstrates that you have a huge potential of innovation in Europe, and that if we want to build on it, we have at least to find ways to find solutions for those companies. So one way is indeed to increase the budget of EU level, but what is also very important is to elaborate concrete synergies, and not only to declare that we will build synergy, but to elaborate concrete synergies with other fundings that exist in Europe, in particular in the structural fund, but also at national and regional level. And this is one of the challenges that we have in front of us. I mean, we have the chance that now we will, during this year, finalize the negotiation for the budget of the MFF, but also finalize the discussion within Horizon Europe regarding how we can build synergies with other part of the framework of the MFF proposal. And I'm sure that it will be a remarkable occasion to translate this in concrete terms.
Okay, all right. Well, at this point, let me bring in the other panelists into the discussion and you, the audience, as well. We can take and will take your questions if you send them to us, and I will transmit them. You can do this in one of two ways. One is to go to our homepage, and you'll find the event page there. This is at sciencebusiness.net. And there's a button there that says ask a question. Do so. We shall get it that way. The other way is you can simply go to Twitter and tweet us a question at hashtag SBDeepTech. That's SB for Science Business, Deep Tech for, well, deep technology. What can I say? So either of those two ways, to our webpage or to Twitter. To send us a question, and our people will catch it and we shall discuss it. But with that in mind, let me come to Graça and to Sergio first. Okay, so we all think that Jean-David's done a great job with the EIC. Sure, okay. Maybe not, maybe. Overall, however, what grade would you give the EU institutions for how they're handling R&D in the COVID crisis? Graça, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. And I would like to say hello to the colleagues in the panel, Sergio and Jean-David, and a special thanks to Richard for the invitation for this debate. Let me first a short comment to what Jean-David has said. and to give the congratulations. Is a fantastic result. And I want to point out that everything that is difficult to start at European levels usually is a successful project. It was with the EIC, it was with the EIT, it was with the Seal of Excellence. Seal of Excellence was an amendment of my report in Horizon 2020, and it was very difficult to negotiate. And it has proven to be a very interesting instrument. And there is also an extra advantage, that is one way that we can put budget together, European budgets with member states budget, with private and regional funds budget, without each of the institutions losing control of their own budgets, because it was very difficult that they allow to put everything in a common pot. Like this, they continue to control their own budget, but we can gather, because one of our problems in Europe is the fragmentation. So the Seal of Excellence is a way that we can a little bit to overcome this fragmentation. And I'm very happy that the EIC is using this Seal of Excellence with successful. I also remember with the previous commissioner, Carlos Moedas, the difficulties that was to launch. I was there in the cabinet from the first moment, the discussions of EIC, and I'm also very pleased that is now a very successful project. So now to your question. I would give different grades to different parts or different programs of the Commission. It's not because of Jean-David being here, but I think that the EIC was probably the one that react fast. It is designed for that, to be flexible, to be fast, and it did so. So the top grade to the EIC. The other parts of the Horizon and of the DGRTD, it took a bit longer to react with the ambitions that I would like them to have react. So they have started end of January, beginning of February, allocating some funds to the vaccine and to the therapies, but in a very with very limited budget for the challenge that we have in front of us. We have a challenge in front of us that requires a huge amount of funding and the collaboration at global level. And this was only, we managed only to arrive to that point with the announcement of the President, Ursula von der Leyen, on the 4th of May. We could have done it before. We start with a more modest ambitions until there. So now we are in the right track. Now we are doing the right things, and congratulations to all the Commission and to Commissioner Maria Gabriel. But it took a little bit in order to understand that we would require that kind of size and ambitions and international cooperation, and so that Graça, is very important.
So Graça, what grade would you give them? A, B, C, D, E, F?
What is the one is the top is A, of course.
A so is the top.
A for the EIC, B for the rest.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
I'm quite kind.
Okay, Sergio, how would you rate the performance on R&D mobilization?
Well, coming as the last one is easy at this point. I can only make myself either very unpopular or just look. I believe that the Commission has reacted incredibly well in this respect. We know in the past all the sometime delays or lengthy procedure. This time, I mean, I think that all in all, it was leading one very important thing is that you make Europe by doing. And this was a perfect example of what Jean-David has made with the EIC. And and the other, and was an example for many things. In Europe, there exists an enormous innovation potential, which is largely untapped because we were slow in the past, and we are still slow at the beginning, just to create the ecosystem of innovation. And I really hope that this crisis will teach us that we need it desperately. And that's why we have this conversation today. And that's why, without having the magic, the silver bullet for everything, we have just to create a comprehensive program which puts into action all the incredible strength that we have as Europe. Because it's needed.
Okay, but Sergio, you're the professor. What grade would you give the EU institutions?
Well, I would give the EAC A+, cum laude, and and I would give it to the rest between B and C.
B and C, okay. So, Jean-David, you might have some unhappy colleagues back there at the in the Berlaymont.
No, many thanks for the kind words of colleagues. I have to say that, I mean, you know, I'm working now within the Commission for almost 20 years. So I had the opportunity to experience also other moments of crisis in the past. And as it was mentioned by Sergio a few minutes ago, I have to say that what happened this time was really amazing regarding the capacity of responsiveness of the Commission. I just would like to illustrate this. I'm listening the point of Gracia, but just to insist on one point. On the 7th of April, Commissioner Maria Gabriel had this meeting with DG, with the Research and Innovation Minister, in order to adopt, in fact, a first set of actions, the so-called ERA versus Corona action list. This was built in a real cooperation between the Commission and the 27 member states, and in particular with their Directorate General for Research and Innovation. Of course, it takes a bit of time, but it was something that was built in co-creation with all the member states. And this is a reason why, as Gracia mentioned it, once it was agreed, I mean, indeed, the speed was there. It took a bit of time indeed to prepare all of this, but once it was agreed, the speed was there. And you can name, as Gracia made it, you can name a number of actions. I will not repeat about the EIC, of course, but you can name what happened on the Innovative Medicine Initiative, what happened in DCTP, what happened regarding the database that has been created, which is now offering a one-stop shop for database regarding COVID, including, for example, also a number of key research infrastructures. And you know this very well, Sergio. So, I mean, this was possible because of this co-creation work between the Commission and the member states. So if I could give a grade to my own institution, Rich, I would say that indeed, I mean, we can do even better because you can still improve, but I would say that a B+ or maybe a A- would be deserved. Because indeed, I mean, maybe we were not as reactive as possible at the very beginning, but very quickly we were in full steam. The fact, as it was mentioned by Maria, that it's the President van der Leyen, in fact, who was the leader for the global response to the coronavirus, is a perfect illustration of this. You should know that for the time being, we have been able to attract almost 10 billion euro for the international pledge. And without taking into account, as you know, the US, because the US are not part of the pledge. So the fact that we have been able very quickly to create this international commitment under the leadership of Ursula von der Leyen, our president, is also a demonstration that indeed the Commission, on behalf of the Union, was very responsive.
Okay, all right. So, and we are getting questions in, so I will pitch them to you very shortly. just to continue that particular discussion a little bit more, what's so hard about moving fast? I mean, it may sound like a naive question, but certainly it was very scary. It still is scary, very scary in the beginning, in February, March in Europe. What is the difficulty of simply getting the R&D community to move faster, or the government funding agencies to do so? Sergio, let me start with you. You have experience. As I said, you were the head of the Italian government's committee studying major risks like this. What's so hard about getting action?
Yeah, my committee was studying earthquakes, floods, volcanoes, and not epidemics or pandemias. And what I learned there is that you have just to be prepared before that. You need just to be prepared to have the fire brigade, just to quote a famous biologist, Peter Piot, who is Belgian. You have just to have the best fire brigade, hoping that there is never a fire. But the fire brigade in itself needs just to be there before, because otherwise you have just to count on a reactive form of things that sometimes works, sometimes it does not. But even if it works, it comes always later and is not using at best all the things that could be used. That's why we are proposing a sort of fire brigade based on exploring this enormous pool of intellect or innovation in Europe based on high-tech, on the disruptive technology, because if this is there, in case that there is a crisis, we don't know which will be the next crisis, but we know that there will be crisis. There will be an easy way in which you can redeploy all this intelligence because it's networked intelligence. And the network is there, the ideas are there, and can be moved easily and with agility among crises. For that, the Commission is the right place, because in order just to achieve this network, there should be a single, essentially, budgeting point or a connection point. And this, I think, that should be one of the things that we should be considering for in the future.
So some kind of a standing network or something?
Yes,
is that what you mean?
Yes. Because I think that is a standing task force for that, based on bottom-up type of innovation, which puts together high-tech, disruptive technologies, and at the same time, design, humanities, because you have just to humanize the technology and not technologize the humans. And this is a very deep, important message that Europe should be giving, because it's based on our founding values.
So then one of the problems, the obstacles, was the lack of some kind of a ready reservoir, a standing network, or something like that. So that's what you're suggesting.
We have taken advantage of a number of these pools there, as Jean-David has just said, because many of the things, including the project inside the European project that I'm supervising in the scientific committee, which is ATTRACT, which is based on disruptive technologies, have moved very swiftly to attack the coronavirus emergency. But instead of having many pools which are disconnected, would be nice just to connect them more and have a standing way in which they can act coherently.
Okay, Graça, what from your experience is the problem with responding quickly with technology to a crisis?
In this case, was very clear that the problem is that Europe doesn't have a National Institute of Health like the US. So I agree with what has said. It's the fragmentation of budget, it's the fragmentation of rules between Commission, European Commission and member states, and even inside the European Commission. You have health research in different parts with different rules, with different complexities. So I have been pushing for many years that we do something about. We really need to have a better coordination on health research and biomedical research. I know that this idea is very much supported by the health professionals, by, for example, the Biomedical Research Alliance. And we have actually pushed that idea in Horizon 2020. And again, the reaction was not very good, mainly from the member states. But I'm convinced that if we had succeeded, the response now would have been completely different, much faster, much more coordinated. So what I think that in Europe is lacking is a kind of European Council for Health Research. I think that would be a very important in order to reach out to the member states, to be able to gather the data in collaboration with the member states, to coordinate better the research when it needs to be coordinated. And I think that will be a very important point for Europe. I will continue trying to push this idea because, like I've told in the beginning, usually are the difficult ideas that take time to be implemented that are the most successful in the end. So well, Graça, I think that will be.
The Commission, von der Leyen has proposed a health program, 9.4 billion euros. So this is not specified yet that it would be in the program, but do you think it should be?
I think that we should try to include inside the health program at least some pilot action that analyze this possibility to have more coordination on the health. It doesn't need to be in all the subjects related to health, but mainly the ones related with the pandemics, infection diseases, everything that is cross-border, that there is a more coordination on health, on data, also in the clinical trials, in the clinical research. So there is a continuation. There is different rules because usually these research programs, they require a more long-time perspective. So we hope that at least the pilot phase and the studies to start with some coordination among the Commission and with the member states will be possible in the health program.
Okay, but Graça, there's a very good reason why there is not such an organization at the moment, and that is that the member states, the majority of them, have always opposed the EU institutions sticking their nose into the health business of the member states.
Yes.
So, I mean, has it really changed?
I think so, because now they realize that they could not face this crisis alone, and they need cooperation. They need cooperation for the therapy, they need cooperation for the vaccine, and they need cooperation for everything around this crisis. So now is the time that we show that for the reasons that, for the subjects that is required to have cooperation, we work together. And I really, I'm pushing for a community method. So it's the Commission that will be the central and will cooperate and collaborate and exchange with the member states so they can keep their sovereignty in their policies on health, but in certain points they will cooperate like to fight crises like the present one. So I really hope that I can push this idea. I'm presenting this inside the EPP and after present to all the colleagues, because we have already present this during Horizon 2020. At the time was not ready. We didn't have a pandemic, so the member states were not very keen on that because of the reasons that you, Richard, had pointed out. But I think that now it's time that we do a small step towards that direction, because I'm convinced that is the right solution.
So we've had two suggestions so far. One is the idea of a standing network, a reservoir of technology and technologists who can respond more quickly to the next disaster. A second is, as Graça, you said, a new EU institution, I guess you would be saying, that would be focused on medical research, particularly in the pandemic and other urgent matters.
In the beginning, does need to be an institution.
Does not.
It does not. The coordination rule can be done through the Commission, can be done through a sister institution like the ERC, and use the same kind of facilities as the European Research Council, and gain a lot of insights and experience from the European Research Council. So I won't start with an institution, because when you start with the institution, you scare immediately the many people that do not want to spend more European budget in buildings and institutions. So the institution per se is not the main objective. The main objective is to have an efficient way to coordinate the research and to work together, to coordinate the data, to work together.
Okay. Now Jean-David, so you're inside the Commission. What's so hard about it getting to move fast for R&D mobilization, and what would you do about it in future?
Thanks, Rich. I mean, within the Commission, I have to say that what I have experienced in the last months is really a work within the DGs and among the DGs. I mean, the silos image that sometimes you may have that existed at some time is not yet there anymore. I mean, you have really a co-creation process that is shaping, in fact, within the Commission. To be very frank, I mean, of course, we are not at all in the same situation of the US, because as always, each time we have this type of crisis, you have inevitably a comparison with what is happening in the United States because of the size of the economy, and this is comparable. We are not a federal state. I mean, the US are a federal state. And what was possible on the side of the US with for example, the warp speed operation launch between at the level of the President Trump, is something that by definition can be launched in Europe, but with the agreement of the member states. It's not something that can be decided alone by the Commission. I mean, the Commission can make some proposal, but the decision is in the end of the Council, and a number of topic in the end also of the European Parliament. So by definition, we have to accept this because it's part of the DNA of the Union as it is. So this is my first point. Having said that, it's not impossible, nevertheless, as mentioned by Maria, by Gracia, to build something that can be very powerful if indeed you have a common vision that can be established within the Council and the Parliament. And I have the feeling that in the context of this crisis, I mean, a number of minds have changed. It's obvious that the kind of challenges we are facing today are not anymore national. I mean, they are European, and for the huge majority of them, they are global. And it is in the interest of the member states themselves now to find common solution among them. So I see a number, therefore, of avenues where it will be possible to build things all together. And obviously, the relevant level will be to implement them at EU level. And this is the raison d'etre of the European Commission. I mean, the European Commission has been created by the member states in order to execute decision of the member states and the European Parliament that are for the benefit of the whole Union. Gracia mentioned a few minutes ago the idea of this health or research council. We are working already on something which is not exactly the same, but which is in the same spirit regarding how to tackle in the future the preparedness of pandemics, because some things that we have missed in this crisis is that we were not prepared per se. I mean, the number of difficulties that we have faced was just a demonstration that indeed we were not prepared. So we are currently working on the idea of a pandemic preparedness partnership. Which type of forms it will take? I mean, will it be a council? Will it be a joint initiative? Will it be? Is something that of course can be discussed, but I do believe that this is going in the same direction of what Gracia has in mind.
So wait a minute, a partnership in Horizon Europe, that is to say a public-private partnership?
It could be within Horizon Europe, of course. It could be also something that is merging efforts coming from various places of the MFF. Because if we want to be agile, I mean, we should avoid to continue to say, this will be done within Horizon Europe, this will be done within Digital Europe, this will be done within InvestEU. We should have a global approach. And any type of support which is necessary in order to develop and to deploy the objective should be provided maybe by various parts of the MFF. So what counts is not the place, what counts is the objective.
Is there a plan for this yet?
We are working about it. I cannot tell you more for the time being, but we are working about it.
The EIC or the Commission?
No, the Commission. I mean, the EIC is not doing everything, Richard. Come on. I mean, no, but more seriously, indeed, I mean, this is a reflection that is ongoing for the time being. If you allow me just 2 seconds, I don't want to monopolize the floor, but I would like to support warmly what Sergio said. Indeed, it is difficult to find agreement and therefore to move quickly due to the current shape of the Union, which is not a federal state, which is indeed a common work agreed on a number of topics and number of policy among member states, but where the national sovereignty remained very important. And it's not a question to challenge this. But something which is very powerful and something where we have a lot of hopes, in fact, is the willingness that you can see at the level of researchers, innovators, entrepreneurs in order to build in reality a single community, a one community. This is this idea that was emerging also in the vision paper of the EIC Advisory Board, building a single community in order to provide solutions to the challenges faced by our countries, our citizens during this crisis, but more globally in the various challenges that we are facing today. When you look at what happened, for example, with the hackathon and the matchathon that we have launched, the capacity of commitment and involvement of something like 21,000 innovators that came with ideas, the capacity of new disruptive solutions that are emerging through a project like ATTRACT that of course Sergio knows very well, the number of really amazing ideas that are emerging in both the Pathfinder of the EIC or the Accelerator, you have a lot of innovation potential in Europe. Now, what is at stake for our policymakers is how to organize this in order to build on this potential. Because it's not that we have not great ideas and great innovators or great researchers or great entrepreneurs in Europe, we have them. It's not that we have not also liquidity and financing. There is a lot of liquidity in Europe, in reality, more than ever in history. The key issue is how to channel this liquidity, how to help the life of our innovators, and how therefore to do it in a way which is as fluid and as agile as possible. And this is certainly one of the most important challenges that we have in front of us. And I do hope that in the context of the final discussion in the MFF with the Parliament, and I know that the Parliament is really on this line also, and with the member states, we will be able to go a step forward towards this direction.
Okay, there's let me throw in a few of the questions that have been coming. One is about innovative procurement. You didn't mention that as a possible instrument to use in trying to get crisis innovation. So the question is, how do you define the role public innovative procurement should play to stimulate innovation?
If I may quickly, just to launch the set of answers. First, I'm sure you have noted that within the EIC proposal for the next MFF, you have a part which is directly dedicated to the use of innovative procurement, because this is by definition a tool that can help the scale up of deep tech startup and companies.
To be clear, Jean-David, define innovative procurement.
I mean, innovative procurement, if I could say it simply, is the ability to use procurement with taking risk. Because this is a bit a contradiction, because especially for a public managing body which is launching procurement, their first objective is to ensure no risk at all. But with innovative procurement, the idea is to help them to take risk, and in particular, therefore, to create the condition for a transition towards more innovative, more disruptive technologies that could, for example, help us to pave the ground to a more sustainable economy. In this context, we are, and there I can already tell you this, we are currently reflecting within the Commission, and not only DG Research and Innovation, but DG Grow, DG Connect, DG Competition, DG Ener, on a revision of what could be done regarding innovative procurement. Because the way we are using innovative procurement for the time being is not providing security to the public institutions that are using them, and therefore they remain reluctant to use innovative procurement. So we have only a few examples of real innovative procurement in Europe for the time being. So we must provide additional security for those bodies in order to use them in a larger magnitude.
Okay, Sergio, I mean, the 170 projects that are in ATTRACT, procurement is ultimately going to be an issue for them as well.
But I'm just following suit with what Jean-David was saying. I mean, the problem is exactly what he has pointed out. In Europe, we have just to increase the appetite for risk. We don't have a lack of innovators. We don't have a lack of opportunity. We have just to think that we cannot progress, compete, and design the new world, because I think that is clear to everybody. We'll never go back to before the COVID. We can go only forward to the COVID and take this opportunity just to increase the appetite for risk, which in Europe, for the reason that were very clearly said by Jean-David, is not there in the right amount. If you want just to be prepared for the crisis, you must have appetite for risk. Appetite for risk means that if you have somebody developing something which is disruptive, innovative, you have just to support and take your small risk instead of going to the business as usual, because otherwise the business as usual, you have just to buy it from elsewhere.
Okay, all right. Another question that is, a couple of people have asked this in different ways, and I'll go to you, Graça, for this. Basically, there's a couple of questions that are about the perceived lack of coordination among the different instruments of the EU when dealing with a crisis. And you know, if we are going to follow through on the proposal that you had, for instance, or the one that Sergio had, what are you going to do about not having too many cooks and nobody is able to actually coordinate? How do you unify it and make it effective when you have such a perplexing array of different instruments, whether it's cohesion or research or whatever?
That's probably one of the most important topics that we need to discuss and solve in research funding in Europe. As I have been saying, we are very fragmented, but look only at the Commission level. We have many instruments that have been developed along the time, and they are complex. They have different entry points with different rules. It's quite difficult for the stakeholder to decide where to go and how to, where is the best place to apply. And this is from the point of view of the stakeholder, and from the point of view of the efficient of the results. We are also not to gain a lot of efficiency on the results because we tend to have in different silos the research that is going on. We need to have a coordination and the flow, for example, inside Horizon 2020 and next inside Horizon Europe. What is going on and the fantastic results that we get in European Research Council usually do not flow and do not feed into the projects that are developed in the societal challenge or in the future in the missions. We need to have a flow of information. We need to have coordination, and we need to have common entry points for the stakeholders.
Okay.
It's not easy. It's a huge task, but will be much simpler if we start simplifying what we have. If we have simpler instruments, we can have a better coordination. It will be easier to coordinate, but it's very important. For example, we had this problem very, very much on the innovation in the past. And through the EIC, we were able to coordinate the immense number of things that already exist on the innovation. We certain way have put a chapeau that is the EIC in many other things, and now is much easier for the stakeholders and has a much more impact because size matters in these things.
Okay.
So we need to do the same kind of thing for the rest, for the whole framework program, and after we need to go from the framework program to other parts of MFF, and after from that to try to reach when is necessary and it's important to the member states.
Okay, that sounds like a long journey.
Yes, but
Graça.
we need to do it. We are able to do it in the innovation, so we can do it also.
Okay, Jean-David.
We can start with health, for example.
No, just to build on what Gracia said, and on which I just subscribed at more than 100%. Just to illustrate this. First, we have proposed, in order to avoid these difficulties that we are facing today in terms of continuity of support at different stage of development of an idea towards innovation, to ensure, for example, that in the frame of the future structural funds, managing authority will have the right to use the same rules of Horizon Europe. Because one of the difficulty, for example, you were mentioning, and it is closing the circle, which the seal of excellence, is that by definition, if you want today to support the seal of excellence with funding that is coming from the structural funds, the legal and the financial rules are not the same as the ones that you have under Horizon 2020. So it creates additional complexity for both the managing authority and for the startup. In the future, we have proposed to the member states and to the parliament to allow the possibility for managing authorities in the structural funds to use the same rules and the same aid intensity as the one under Horizon Europe. Because if you have this kind of simplification, this type of possibility will be easier to implement. The second remark I would like to do is that, and it's also building on what Gracia said, we have a number of great ideas that are emerging from the European Research Council, in particular in the context of their proof of concept support today. But you have no direct link that was made with the next step. So how to provide the means for these great ideas that are emerging from frontier research initially to move towards, in fact, either a transformation of a technology or to the use in a company. And this is what we are proposing to do within the EIC with the transition activities. This idea there is to make this direct link and to create a kind of fast track. This is the terminology which is used within Horizon Europe in order to build on this potential. But this is true for the ERT, but it is also true for some things that, for bodies that Gracia knows very well, which is the EIT. Because they're also in the EIT in a number of kicks. You have a number of startups that are emerging that should benefit from the support that is provided by the accelerator of the EIC, and vice versa. You could also create situation where a number of EIC funding company can receive support from a number of acceleration services that are provided locally by EIT kicks. And this is the reason why we have launched already this year 4 pilots with 4 different EIC kicks in order to build this synergy concretely. And this is one of the challenges that we have in front of us indeed.
Okay, so we will end just in a few minutes. A couple of other quick questions that came in. Sergio, there's a question for you. What kind of measures do you foresee to assure the continuous functioning of a network of innovators? So, I mean, I guess the question is, practically speaking, how would this network happen that you were talking about?
I have the example of ATTRACT. ATTRACT is a good example of that. ATTRACT was a project launched by the Commission to attract bottom-up innovation, disruptive ideas in the imaging and detectors and all the associated data handling to that. Was a project which was able just to select 170 winners, which were given seed money. Out of 1,211 proposals coming up, really bottom up from all parts of Europe. What is the idea behind it? Is that not all of these ideas will survive. You want something which grows fast and dies fast if it is not sustained. But at the same time, while you are doing that, you are creating an open network of innovators which connect among themselves, and we see it happening already now, and they can just coalesce into bigger units. In the second phase of ATTRACT, there will be the selection of the most emerging one, which have more potential to the market, and we will essentially push them just to go faster to the market. And at the same place, all the institutional investors and private investors will be called in just to pick up good ideas. So after a cycle, what you have done, you have created the seed of a community, which has infinite number of connection inside, and which grows larger and larger. And this, at the end, will, in our opinion, not only as a single instrument, but together with all the instruments, create what we have done in the past for the science. Europe has the most developed ecosystem for open science. We have demonstrated that. If Europe succeeds just to transfer it to innovation, with open innovation, Europe will be very resilient to any develop in the future.
Okay.
And this is what I think that also Jean-David and Maria de Graça have in mind. We have just to go upscale.
Okay, all right. The one last question. Well, there's some very specific questions for you, Jean-David, but one of them is, do you foresee any budget increase for the October 2020 EIC deadline?
Under the current situation, unfortunately, not. No, because I mean, we indeed, I mean, we have currently a call for the EIC accelerator, which has closed, which was dedicated to the Green Deal with a budget of around 300 million euro. And the last call that remains, it is indeed the October call as far as the accelerator is concerned. And we have the remaining available budget voted by the Council and the Parliament, which is 164 million euros. So unfortunately, we have no additional means available.
Okay, all right. Well, at this moment then, let's suspend the discussion. And I say only suspend it because this topic is going to be living with us for the next X number of years. How can we respond more quickly to emergencies with needed technology? Hopefully, there won't be another pandemic, but eventually we will all remember that there's also a problem called global warming. And that can also get very scary, in addition to any number of other problems. So with that, I would like to thank Sergio, Graça, and Jean-David for their help. Jean-David, thank you very much for bringing to us some news as well. So thank you to all for listening.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you to everybody.
Thank you.
Many thanks,
Thank
Richard.
you to everybody.
Many thanks, Gracia and Sergio.
Thank you.
Thank you.